At some point in this work, the mirror stops being cooperative, stops reflecting what you expect to see, and it begins to show you the versions of yourself that you never meant to become. The ones who learned to please or disappear, the ones who said yes when everything in them wanted to say no. You met those versions this week. You watched your projections collapse. You began to see that the stories you've been telling about other people were never about them at all. They were about you, about the memories that still drive your reactions, about the defenses that shape your choices, and the small frightened intelligence inside you that learned to perform for love. Seeing this is disorienting. It shakes the foundation of who you think you've been. It asks you to admit how often you've mistaken survival for identity, how you've been calling adaptation authenticity. But what you're experiencing is not a failure, it's freedom. It's the moment when the illusion cracks just enough for the truth to really breathe. The truth is that most people never meet themselves. They live inside a hall of echoes, mistaking their reflections for reality. Every opinion, every judgment, every defense bounces off of another mirror until all that remains is noise. But you're learning to step outside of that chamber. You're starting to hear life itself, not your fears or your conditioning, but the unfiltered signal of awareness. What you discovered this week, it wasn't your shadow. It was your reflection without distortion. It was your consciousness unmasked. And that's what the soul calls awakening. You might not have liked everything that you saw, and that's natural. The mirror is not designed to flatter you, it's designed to free you. Once you see yourself clearly, you can't return to sleep. You start to notice how the micro moments, the subtle shrinking when you're asked to speak, or the quiet compliance when you want to stand tall, the old reflex that reaches for the mask because honesty still feels unsafe. Awareness changes everything. Once you see the mechanism, you have choice. You no longer confuse protection with truth. You no longer call performance love. The goal was never to destroy the masks. It was to remember who was wearing them. And that realization marks a pivot in your entire human experiment. Because the moment you stop running from your own reflection, life stops running from you. So before you move on, take a moment and honor the work that you've done. You faced what most people spend their whole life running from. And you didn't look away, you stayed. You allowed the mind to tremble and the identity to fracture, the truth to arrive unfiltered. That's not comfort work, that's consciousness work. And it changes the trajectory of a life. What the mirror revealed wasn't a stranger. It was the version of you that's been waiting patiently for permission to exist. Ask yourself, what did the mirror show you that you weren't ready to see before? Where are you still performing for safety or approval? Which reflection still feels difficult to face? And what is it asking of you now? How has your definition of truth changed after this week? And what part of you feels more clear, more clean, more precise? Not because you tried to fix yourself, but because you finally stopped lying to yourself. You're now entering a new phase of your blueprint journey. The next chapter is not about seeing, it's about being. It's where awareness becomes embodiment, where you stop observing change and begin living it. You've spent your entire life learning how to see, and now the work changes. Now the question becomes, what will you do with what you see? Awareness without embodiment is only observation. It keeps you in the balcony, analyzing the play of your own life instead of walking onto the stage. But the moment you step down from the balcony, everything that you've studied becomes real. The theory of truth becomes the practice of alignment. To live what you now know means choosing accuracy over comfort. Means noticing every moment that the old code tries to reinstall itself. The reflex to apologize for existing. To shrink for belonging. To trade clarity for control. Each time you catch it, you have a choice. Replay the past or authorize the present. And honestly, this is the point where awakening stops being poetic and starts becoming mechanical. Your nervous system learns that peace is not the absence of threat. It's the absence of pretense. You start moving through life without rehearsing yourself first. You speak before editing your tone. You rest without asking permission. You love without proof. And suddenly everything around you begins to shift. Not because the world changed, but because you're finally participating in it without a disguise. The mirror you've been studying from the outside becomes transparent. You stop meeting reflections and start meeting reality. Consciousness is not an escape from humanity. It's the full arrival into it. It's the ability to stand in contradiction without losing coherence. To hold grief and gratitude in the same breath. To know that expansion doesn't erase pain, it contextualizes it. And the life ahead of you will not be easier, it'll be truer. You'll still feel fear, but it won't disguise itself as truth. It won't be able to. You'll still encounter judgment, but you'll recognize it as someone else's mirror and not your verdict. You'll still fall, but you'll fall consciously. And that changes everything. Because living consciously means that you no longer measure growth by what stays standing. You measure it by what can fall without breaking your faith in yourself. So when the old patterns whisper, play small and stay safe, you'll smile not because you're above them, but because you know their language. You've learned to translate fear back into data. You've learned that every hesitation is just unprocessed intelligence waiting for your command. And from this point, creation itself begins to trust you again. It starts to collaborate instead of test. Life stops being a riddle to solve and becomes a conversation to continue. You become both author and instrument, both question and answer. And that's the moment that embodiment is all the way online. When the distance between thought and action collapses. When truth no longer needs proof to exist. So take one more quiet breath and just remember, you're not here to perfect the reflection. You're here to become the presence that no longer needs one. That's what it means to live the blueprint. Not to rise above your story, but to move through it with such coherence that the story begins to evolve with you. It's not the end of awakening. It's the beginning of participation. It's the moment where seeing ends and being begins.